Hi everyone, today I want to show you how to make this super cute baby blanket pattern that I've come up with. I've called it the Aurora blanket because the colours that I've used here with the navy blue and the bright colours remind me slightly of the Aurora Borealis, but it works equally well in any colour palette that you want to choose, and it even works really well in a solid colour or with the main body in a variegated yarn with a solid colour for the edge. I'm going to talk you through exactly how you make the main body and how you work the edge of the blanket. I'll also give you the pattern repeat in multiples so that you can make this blanket in any size that you want. So grab your hook and yarn and let's get going. So for this tutorial, I'm just going to be making a small sample to show you how the rows are worked. If you want to replicate this blanket in particular, I chained 109 for my starting row and I worked 20 sets of the double crochet repeats and 19 sets of the cluster repeats. I'll pop a link to a written pattern down in the description for those of you that would like to replicate this exactly, and I'll list the colours and the colour order that I used as well if you'd like to know those. The pattern multiple for this blanket is 3 plus 1. So you want to chain however long you want your piece to be in multiples of 3, and then you just need to add one more chain to the end of that chain. For this tutorial, I'm just going to make a small sample, so I'm going to go ahead and chain 34. And I'll meet you back at the end of your starting chain to show you what to do. I just want to remind you that I use American stitch terms for all of my crochet, so if you normally use UK terms, then I have linked to a conversion chart in the description so that you can take a look at that before you get going. Once you have done your starting chain, you want to pop a double crochet into the 4th chain from your hook. Don't forget that this loop here on the hook does not count as a chain, so you want to count 4 down and work a double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. And then you want to go ahead and work a double crochet into every single chain of your starting chain. So just double crochet all the way along, making sure that you work 1 stitch into each of your chain stitches from the beginning. When you've worked a double crochet into every stitch and you reach the end of your row, you want to chain 2 and turn your work. I chain 2 for my turns, but if you find that chaining 3 for your turns works best for you, then feel free to substitute this chain 2 for a chain 3. This chain turn here counts as a stitch, so we ignore this first stitch here, and then we want to work back down the row, working a double crochet back into every double crochet from the row below. As with all the chain turns in this project, when you get to the end of the row, the chains count as a stitch, so you want to work your final double crochet into the top of the chains from the beginning of the first row. And then you want to break your yarn, and if you sew in your tails as you go, then sew them in. I just secure them and I go in and sew them in properly in bulk rows of about 10 rows at a time. It just makes it slightly less tedious, but so that my stitches feel secure, I run the tail down the height of the double crochet, the final double crochet, and just pull tight, and that means that I have a nice secure stitch to work into. Now if you're working in different colours, this is why we've broken the yarn, because we're going to change yarn colour. If you're working in solid colours, you would just ignore this step and you would work the next step without changing your yarn. So because this first double crochet stripe of 2 rows includes your starting row, I count row 3 as the start of my pattern repeat, because ideally you want to end your blanket on a stripe of double crochet in the same way that you started it. So the next step to do is to join your new yarn in your chosen colour. I'm just using 2 contrasting colours here so you can see what we're doing. You want to join your hook into the top of that last final double crochet that we worked from the previous row. You want to pull up a loop and chain 3, and then turn your work. This chain 3 counts as a stitch. What you want to do next is you want to skip the next stitch, and into the subsequent stitch you want to work a cluster V stitch. So a cluster V stitch is made up of a double crochet 2 together, chain 2, and another double crochet 2 together. Then you want to skip 2 stitches and work that same cluster V into the 3rd stitch along. Chain 2 and your second double crochet 2 together. And you want to repeat this process all the way along the row until you have 2 double crochets left. So that would be 1 double crochet plus your chain 2 turn from the row below. So I'm now left with 2 double crochets, 1 actual stitch and 1 chain 2 turn from the previous row, and we're going to skip this last double crochet, and into the chain 2 turn from the row below you want to work a double crochet. And then you want to chain 3 and turn your work. Now on this row we're only working into the chain 2 spaces, so we ignore all the stitches that the clusters have formed. We're only working into the chain 2 spaces, and into those chain 2 spaces we again want to work our cluster V combination, which is a double crochet 2 together, chain 2 and another double crochet 2 together, back into that same stitch gap. Ignore these stitches. Into the next chain 2 gap we do exactly the same, and you want to fill in all those gaps all the way along, and I'll meet you for the last stitch of the row. Once you've worked a cluster V stitch combination into every stitch from the row below, you want to work 1 final double crochet into your chain 3 turn. Cut your yarn, secure your tail, and then we're ready to start row 3 of our 4 row repeat. So back with the same colour yarn that you were using for your double crochets, you want to join your yarn to the top of the double crochet you've just worked, and chain 2. Again, if you like to chain 3 for these turns, then please feel free to do so. Then you want to turn your work, and into the next stitch, which is the cluster from the row below, you want to work a double crochet. Into the chain 2 gap you want to work a double crochet, and we are going to double crochet into the top of every cluster from the row below, and then we're going to pop 1 double crochet into the chain 2 gaps from the row below. And once again your final double crochet is worked into the top of the chain 3 from the row below. If you've worked your stitches correctly and you have worked 1 into the top of every double crochet 2 together from the row below and 1 into every chain 2 gap, you should have the same amount of double crochets that you started with. If you have more or if you have less, then you've not worked your stitches correctly. So just make sure that you are only working 1 double crochet into the chain 2 gap and 1 double crochet into each of the top of the double crochet 2 togethers from the row below. Then you want to chain 2, turn, miss this first double crochet because our chain 2 counts as that double crochet, and then you want to double crochet all the way along the row into every stitch in the row and work your final double crochet into the top of the turning chain from the row below. So these 4 rows here are what make up your pattern repeat. So you would work as many as you like for however big your project needs to be, and try to remember to finish on a double crochet stripe. You can finish on the V-stitch stripe, but I feel like the edging is neater if you finish on a double crochet stripe. I'm going to go away, I'm going to make this sample just a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to show you how we work the edging. So I've gone away and made my sample just a little bit bigger, so we now have something that resembles the world's smallest blanket, but it means I have a little bit more stitches to be able to show you how to work your edge. You want the right side of your blanket facing you, so that would mean that your tail from your starting chain is on the left hand side of the blanket, and the chain 3 that you worked into on your starting chain is on the right hand side of your blanket. For the edge, I would always advise sizing down 1 hook size from the hook that you've used for your blanket. So I used a 4mm hook for this. So for my edging, I'm going to use a 3.5mm hook. I'm going to show you how to work the edge in a nice contrasting colour so you can see the stitches, but you can work your edge and your blanket in whatever colours you like. You want to join your yarn to a stitch at the top of the blanket. Quite where, it doesn't matter, but just onto the top edge. You want to pull up a loop, chain 1, this does not count as a stitch, and you want to single crochet back into that same stitch. Then you want to work a single crochet all the way to the end of the row. When you get to the end of the row, you want to work 3 single crochet into the top of this chain 2 turn. If you find that too tight and fiddly, you can just work it into the gap, but I like to work it into the chain itself to pull the chain tight and to straighten the edge just that little bit more. So 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. And those 3 single crochet form our corner. Now for the long edges, into the double crochet blocks, I like to work 3 stitches evenly across the 2 rows. So 1 into the first post, then the stitch that is formed by the middle of the 2 rows, I pop another single crochet, and then into the post from the stitch I work another one. So I work 3 evenly across the 2 rows. Some of you may find that you need to work 4 evenly across the 2 rows, but for me I only need to work 3. Then for the V-stitch rows, you want to work 2 single crochet into the side of each of the rows, so that is 4 single crochet across the 2 rows. Then into the double crochet block again, we're going to work 3 stitches, and then 4 stitches across the V-stitch rows. So that's 2 in that first row and 2 in the second row. When you've worked your last stitch, you want to work 3 single crochets into this first chain from your starting chain, and this will form our corner again. So 3 single crochet into this starting chain. And then just like on the top row, you want to work 1 single crochet into the bottom of each stitch on your starting chain. Depending on how you've worked into your starting chain, you may have 2 loops to pick up, but I only have 1 because I work into 2 loops of the starting chain when I do my first row. So you want to single crochet all the way across to the end. When you've worked into the last double crochet from that row, you want to work your corner stitches into the chain closest to that double crochet. So into that bottom of that starting chain, we're going to work 3 single crochet again. And then on this long edge, again, it's the same. You're going to work 3 single crochets evenly across the double crochet rows and 4 single crochets across the V-stitch rows. This side can be a little bit tighter because you want to put your middle stitch of the 3 into the turning chain. But once you find where to put it, it becomes second nature. So that's 3 across those and then 4 across the V-stitch rows. This gives you a border that will lay nice and flat. Once you've finished that long edge again into the top of the first double crochet from that final row of the blanket, you want to work your 3 single crochets for the corner. And then you just want to single crochet round to where you started. Once you reach the beginning of your round, you want to pop a slip stitch into the top of that first single crochet to join the round to complete it. Round 2 is virtually the same, except we are going to work half double crochets. So you want to chain 1 and work a half double crochet back into that same stitch. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch. Then you want to work a half double crochet into every stitch in the round, and into the middle stitch of your corner stitches you want to work 3 half double crochet. So where you hit your corner of 3 stitches, you want to work 3 half double crochet into the middle stitch. So I'll just show you with this first corner. Here we have our 3 stitch corner, 1, 2, 3. You want to work 1 half double crochet into the first stitch, 3 half double crochet all into that second stitch, and then 1 half double crochet into the third stitch. And then you just work 1 half double crochet into every stitch along this edge, and then work 3 into the middle stitch of each corner cluster, and then I will meet you back round at the beginning again. So I'm all the way back at the beginning of the round again now. This is the first stitch that we worked. You want to ignore the chain that you worked and you want to pop a slip stitch into the first half double crochet that you worked. Round 3 is worked exactly the same way as round 2. So you want to work a half double crochet into every stitch around, working 3 half double crochets into the middle stitch of your 3 stitch corner cluster. So I will go ahead and complete my round 3, and I'll meet you back at the end of round 3 to show you what to do for round 4. So that's round 3 completed, and in the same way that you did with round 2, you want to join your completed round to the first stitch with a slip stitch, not working into the chain but working into the half double crochet from the first stitch in the round. Round 4 is virtually the same, but instead of working half double crochets we are going to work single crochets. So you want to chain 1 and work a single crochet back into that same stitch. And then you want to single crochet all the way around, making sure to work 3 single crochets into the middle stitch from your corner group of 3 stitches. I'm going to crochet round, and I'll meet you back at the beginning to show you how we do our final round of edging. So we are done with round 4, and just like all the other rounds, we join our last stitch to our first stitch with a slip stitch into the top of that first round. So this final round of edging has to be my favourite because I really think that it finishes the blanket off and just gives it a really nice polished finished effect. For this 5th round we are going to work a round of reverse single crochet, which is easier than it sounds. Basically we are working single crochets, but instead of working them in a direction from right to left, we are going to work round the wrong way and work left to right. So you are essentially working your single crochets backwards. It sounds more complicated than it is. So to start our round, as always, we want to chain 1, and then you want to pop your hook into the first stitch to the right of where you finished, so working back into the last stitch we worked. You want to put your hook in, yarn over and draw up a hoop like you would with a single crochet, yarn over and pull through 2. I'll just show you again. Pop your hook into your work as if you were working a single crochet, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through 2. Don't overthink it. I said this in a previous tutorial. It is just single crochet but worked backwards. If you think about it too much, it will feel unnatural and go wrong. If you don't think about it too much, it will become second nature. So what you need to do is work all the way around your blanket, working 1 single crochet into each stitch. You don't work any extra stitches for your corners on this round, you just work all the way around with your reverse single crochet. When you get to the end, I'll meet you back here because rather than joining with a slip stitch, I'm going to show you how we sew our ends in to get an invisible join on this round. So I've finished the round now and I've worked a reverse single crochet all the way around into every single stitch, and our final stitch we want to pop into this stitch here. This is a stitch that we didn't work, but it looks like a stitch because we chained 1 before we started. So just 1 final reverse single crochet there, and then we want to break our yarn because we don't want to join to the top of the next stitch with a slip stitch. Break our yarn and leave a tail long enough to sew in, and then to make your join virtually invisible when you sew in your ends, you want to pop your needle into the middle of the stitch here from the front, and you want to push it diagonally through to the back all the way through the stitch. Then you want to pull tight and you'll see that it joins and you virtually can't see the join. And then you just want to sew your ends in as normal, and that's your project finished. So there we have it, one finished Aurora blanket, albeit in miniature. If you go ahead and make one of these blankets, please tag me in social media. I love to see what you guys are making, and I'll see you again for another tutorial soon. Bye!